Okay, so we're in round 2 of defending against null references, null reference exceptions. I'm going to go ahead and write a simple program that demonstrates this. So we'll call this my test method, and we will give it a network credential, and we'll set it to null because that's what we're going to test. You'll see automatically it shows us shows the little blue squiggly saying that's a bad idea. Let's create this method. Down here, what we're going to do is network credential. We're going to wrap it in a try catch block, and we're going to call it exception. Down here, I'm going to put the exception handler here. We're going to bypass the debug check because we're in debug, and we're going to show the desktop, which is new, 132 window, native.get, native.get desktop window. And there we have it. We have a we're going to do the next version of it, which is network credential, and name of network credential. So now, when we run this, we'll set a breakpoint here, and we will watch what happens. So the first thing I'm going to do is show you what happens at the end, which is great. At the very top, we've got the offset, which is actually in addition to the stack trace that you normally get, and you get the file name and the line that it occurred on, which is great. Okay, so let's step through it this time so you can see how this works. You're going to be seeing a lot of various internal extensions that I'm not going to run through, but if you guys want to understand how they work, well, maybe I'll run through a couple of them. But if you see something in this that you want to understand how it works, I'm more than happy to do another video or answer it via post. This one's kind of interesting to decide whether or not I'm running in debug mode. There is an extension here that I wrote, which grabs the custom attributes off of the assembly itself, and there's one called the is JIT tracking enabled, which is basically saying is it in debug build or not. So if it's true, which you see here, it means that we're in debug mode. So we are in debug mode, so I'm going to include trace, which because we don't want to do that in non-debug mode, right? Because that's essentially exposing your user potential hacker to your stack trace, which can be dangerous, and it can also accidentally release security-related information, so we don't want to do that. If I hand a true to the stack trace constructor, I get file information like the file name and the line and all that. Otherwise, it's false because it's additional expense. Put true here. This is actually getting the frame, and if you'll notice, the constant is 2 because the throw if empty is 0, and the internal method is 1, and the original color is 2. So we put 2 here. We get the stack frame, and if you drop that down, you can actually see that that's back in our test program, and the method is here. So we've got the right frame. So I'm going to go ahead and append some information to the message. Now you'll see argument is null at test method at offset, blah, 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 blah. And then I'm going to throw the null, the argument null exception. Okay, we get down to here. And this if it's not a Windows app, it does some things to log it messages to debug or to trace. It also has a file-based logging system that it'll log to if you have the appropriate configurations in app.config or web.config. But we'll skip that for now. But at the end of the day, what we get is a nice little dialogue that says all the information that we need for figuring out where we have a null exception. Now, once again, the fact that I've used this type of calling convention with the type T means that even if this is null, I can still get the type information from it. And that gives you, as a debugger, a hint as to where you should go look. Because if this is null, there's no way to say get type on a null, right? So you have no way of knowing what the type was that caused the exception. So this may be a little bit more verbose, and there is a little bit more keystrokes, although if you saw the way that I did it with autocomplete and resharper, it takes about, less than a second to write that method, basically. Once you get used to it, and you're not doing it in a video, it becomes sort of second nature. So it's worth the extra effort and the extra verbosity here to include the type in the call. So that's the essentials of how that works.